Hello everyone and welcome to DownUnderSteer. No time to keep up with all the latest Formula 1 news, we do all the hard work for you. My name is Franky and joining me today is Jem. In today's show we review the excitement and surprises from the recent Malaysian Grand Prix. Let's go. We're skipping the news today purely because we want this show to be all about the Malaysian Grand Prix, which frankly was an amazing race. What we will quickly do though is announce the Guess Which Corner. This is competition. We had many guesses on this one, so Jem.
Okay, so the corner for this week was the first chicane at Monza.
Popular corner, many people having a guess successfully at that one. So we'll move along to next week's corner. What have we got here?
It's another chicane and it's fairly well known, but it is an unusual perspective, this photo.
So no more hints other than that. And we're going to kick straight into our Malaysian race review. In qualifying, McLaren just right up the front again as they were in Australia. We've got a 1-2 for Hamilton and Button.
McLaren looking very strong in qualifying. Their cars are looking glued to the track.
Mercedes also looking quite good in all of the practice sessions and in qualifying. They were right up at the pointy end.
I think Mercedes, it's only 2 races into the season, but it already looks like they've got a car that's great on Saturday and not so good on Sunday. So, the top 8 actually were very close in Q3 for this Grand Prix. At a minute 36, this is a fairly lengthy lap as well, so it just goes to show how much the front of the field has bunched up for this year.
Well, I think you've just detailed it pretty well there, as they have built their car around this Saturday performance, which was the strategy of Red Bull last year, is to get Vettel out there in front for the first couple of laps and then control the pace of the race from there.
Although I do think, though, that even if Mercedes could qualify on the front of the grid, do they have the race pace to be able to hold off the teams behind them? Yes, the obvious thing to talk about is Fernando Alonso and Ferrari. Who would have thought after the nightmare start to the season they'd had that he'd be leading the championship after 2 rounds?
After qualifying only in 9th, went on to lead the race by lap 16 and stayed there until the very end. Put under immense pressure from Sergio Perez through most of the race, which I think everyone who watched that race, it was just an inspiring performance from the Mexican to be applying that much pressure to Alonso.
Yeah, it was. I don't know about you, but I think I was probably one of many who was really barracking Sergio Perez to make that move on Fernando Alonso and take the win.
Being in the crowd there, everyone was behind Perez for the second half of that race. Everyone was on their feet as they came through, and you could just see that gap narrow lap after lap.
That was particularly impressive, that bit of driving by Sergio Perez. What was more impressive about that stint when they were both moved on to slick tyres is that while Fernando Alonso had taken the option tyre, Sergio Perez was on the hard tyre and still lapping at that pace. That's pretty remarkable.
There was 2 key mistakes which the Sauber team made. One, pitting Sergio 1 lap late, or maybe even 2 laps late. And also, later in the race, Sergio having a slight off when he was actually within half a second of Alonso.
From the moment that he ran wide, I think at that point he was probably thinking, let's just make sure we hold on to second. He did run across the tarmac perilously close to getting onto the gravel, which would have been the end of his race. And it's got to make you wonder, where is Sergio Perez's future now?
Well, many have hinted at him to take Massa's seat at Ferrari, and with a performance that good, you'd have to think that he's going to be lining himself up to do that.
Yes, obviously with Fernando Alonso winning that race in impressive style and Felipe Massa only managing 15th. How much longer does Ferrari give Felipe Massa to prove himself?
Talking about the other success stories from the Malaysian Grand Prix, we've got Bruno Senna, who also drove the race of his career so far.
Absolutely.
Qualifying in 13th in the Williams Renault, he was able to make his way through the field and ended up finishing in 6th, which is the strongest performance Williams have had for a very long time, and he even scored more points, which Williams did in their entire season last year.
Yes, it was a crucial result for Williams, and I think it really does show that not only has Bruno Senna stepped up his game, but obviously Williams has produced a far better car than they did last year. Can I just say that it is great to hear and to say Williams Renault again for the first time in 15 years?
Yeah, that's good. And Senna only finishing the race 8 seconds after Kimi Raikkonen in the Lotus.
Yep, Kimi Raikkonen also had a good race, qualifying in 5th, but unfortunately taking the 5-place grid penalty because of a gearbox change. Grosjean was a bitter disappointment going
Really,
out
yeah.
very early. In fact, I think so far this season he's completed 4 racing laps.
It is really disappointing. I mean, in Melbourne, true, he might have been pushed off the road slightly, but here it was his own fault. It was probably a lap before the safety car came out and he just lost it into the gravel.
Yep. I mean, it was perhaps understandable in the conditions, but I mean, plenty of other drivers didn't make that mistake.
That's it.
But I got to say, actually, after 2 races, I would say that Lotus and Mercedes have shown a vast amount of potential, but haven't really translated that into the points that I think they deserve.
That's
I mean,
right.
Lotus is sitting in 5th place at the moment on 16 points. Behind McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari. Obviously, Sauber is a surprise 4th. But I do feel that they could have probably been a little bit further ahead if Grosjean had managed to pick some points up as well.
The rain started to come down for the first time the entire weekend, around 15 minutes before the race was due to start. The race starting under wet conditions, not behind the safety car.
No, I think nearly everyone started on intermediates.
By lap 9, the safety car had come out.
Yes.
They'd ruled it too wet to continue at that point.
Yep, and it was in that first 9 laps that Sauber made their first key decision by bringing in Sergio Perez after the first lap and putting him on the full wet straight away.
That's right.
And he managed to capitalise on that, and by the time the red flag was shown, he was lying in 3rd position. But I mean, I have to say, actually, that as the race progressed, I was expecting a charge from Lewis Hamilton to eventuate. I fully expected him to catch both Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso, but it never happened.
He really just drove a very consistent race. Got to really hand it to him for measuring the conditions well. After the red flag occurred on lap 9, there was a stoppage for the rain for about an hour's time. There's many nervous faces going around in the crowd, and it was interesting hearing how silent the entire crowd was for that moment.
Right.
There was quite a symbolic moment as the rain was beginning to die down, where Tony Fernandez, a team principal for Caterham F1, was seen strutting back down the pit lane, very obviously putting his umbrella away, signalling that he thought it was time to go racing.
Oh, right, okay.
Being a Malaysian resident, if anyone was going to be reading the weather here, it was Tony Fernandez, and it was a really humorous moment to end that red flag session.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess he was thinking that, these kind of wet conditions is always an opportunity for teams like Caterham to pick up some surprise points.
That's right. And how'd they end up doing?
Well, Vitaly Petrov ended up 16th and Heikki Kovalainen 18th. Both a lap down, still finishing ahead of the Marussias and the HRTs, obviously. I mean, what I thought also was interesting was Narayan Karthikeyan was involved with incidents, both Jenson Button and Sebastian Vettel. What are your thoughts on those incidents?
At the time, the Vettel incident, I thought was Sebastian's fault. Just by looking at it, it looked like he didn't give Karthikeyan enough room as he was overtaking him.
Yep.
Looking back on the footage, though, Karthikeyan takes a little right turn just as Vettel goes past him. It's very, very subtle, but you've got to say that he did turn right on Vettel at that moment, and he did receive a penalty after the race, which translated to a 20-second time increase on his lap time.
Oh, okay. Which, I mean, essentially means nothing for Karthikeyan because he was basically last anyway. But, I mean, I also think that Sebastian Vettel needs to take some of the blame on that one. He did pull in front of him and he cut it very fine, and there really was no need to. He's probably feeling a little bit of frustration so far this season. I mean, he had such a dominant campaign last year that, he finds himself 6th in the championship. His race to 2nd in Australia was good, but his race in Malaysia wasn't so impressive. What about Jenson Button?
Started off well. So at the restart, he was still in 2nd. When he hit Karthikeyan after the restart, that really just shafted him and put him all the way back down the field in around 20th.
Yeah.
And he just could not recover from that point,
No.
even having to make an extra pit stop for inters.
Yeah, he just couldn't get them to work, and he was complaining of a vibration at the front of the car. And I mean, I really expected, as soon as it started to rain before the race started, I was seriously expecting Button to be a major player in this race. I mean, he made a pretty clumsy move on Karthikeyan. That was clearly Button's fault, I think.
That's true. And he also admitted that after the race in a post-race interview.
Yeah.
And good on him for doing so.
If we look at the constructors' standings, a couple of episodes ago we were talking about the battle in the midfield. I mean, obviously after 2nd place with Sergio Perez, they've got a pretty comfortable lead. But the rest of them, Force India, Williams and Toro Rosso, have 9, 8 and 6 points respectively. They're very, very close at the moment.
I think we could expect Williams to carry on with this type of strength. How do you feel about their mid-season development?
Last year they were just so far behind the pace, and I think they'd just gone so far down the wrong track they were doomed from early on. But I mean, they're definitely in with a look at getting a decent position in the championship this year. Daniel Ricciardo had a very quiet race and didn't seem to do much, but we must also acknowledge that John-Eric Verne scored his first Formula 1 points in Malaysia, steered clear of trouble, managed to come across a line in 8th place, 4 points for Toro Rosso.
Okay, so final thoughts on Malaysian Grand Prix?
It's been one of the best Grand Prix that I've seen in a long time. In fact, probably the best Grand Prix since Canada last year. We haven't talked a great deal about Fernando Alonso, but I mean, this has been a classic Fernando Alonso victory. He's just been relentless, hasn't made any errors while all those around him were making mistakes. I think it reinforces the idea that he probably is still the most complete driver on the grid at the moment.
The only person that was going to take it away from him was Perez. Making those few errors just meant it wasn't going to happen for him.
Over the last few years, they've put the Malaysian Grand Prix back to a 4 p.m. local time start, which means that those sort of afternoon rains come in. So, I mean, what do you reckon? It's better to start the race even later to avoid that dumping of rain?
I don't think you can start it much later than that in Malaysia. I mean, the sun is going down shortly after that. I mean, you saw the race had finished after the 1 hour delay that we had.
Yeah.
It was almost dark by that time. I don't think they could have gone on much longer.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Well, I mean, a good dump of rain in the middle, even if it does mean we have to sit around for an hour for the water to clear off the track, does make for a brilliant race.
Going to our bets throughout the season, none of us picked up any points in Malaysia. I had Button picked for the pole and the win.
I picked Schumacher for the pole, and he did come close to snatching it. But I picked Jenson Button for the win. No, I picked Lewis Hamilton for the win, didn't I? So no good there. So what are your thoughts for China?
Well, I hadn't put any thought into it until you asked me that, but putting me on the spot, I'm going to go with Hamilton for pole and Webber down for a win.
Oh, okay. I am going to go Schumacher for pole, and I think it's probably time for Lewis Hamilton to win a Grand Prix, so I'll pick him for the victory in China.
All right. Okay, cool. As always, thanks everyone for joining us. We're having great fun putting all these together. Get the word out there. We do want more subscribers. We think we're on something good here. We want all your friends to know about it. You can find us on Facebook. You can email us at DownUnderSteer@gmail.com and please put in your guesses for Guess What Corner this is. Either reply to our YouTube comments or send us an email. Don't forget to hit the like button, and we'll see you again next week.